Okay, we begin now with Article 13, and I call on Mr. Hornick to make the motion.
I move in terms of the article, and I request 7 minutes. I might only need 6, but I want to be safe.
Okay, let's look for a second first on the motion. Do we have a second? And Mr. Hornick has requested 2 additional minutes for 7 instead of 5. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Moderator hears a majority. You may continue, and you have a total of 7 minutes, which, as you said, you don't have to use it all.
Mr. Moderator, members of town meeting, and yes, this article proposes to create a town meeting advisory committee. It is the work of the TMCC Subcommittee on Policies and Procedures. The article rests on one simple idea. What if town meeting had an advisory group that was committed to reviewing individual warrant articles prior to town meeting and reporting, both in writing and orally, useful information about expected impacts, as well as the pros and cons of each article? Would you find that valuable? Let's briefly examine this possibility. What are its strengths? What are its weaknesses? Well, first, town meeting often hears only one point of view when people speak on an article. Whether it is the authors, the finance committee, the planning board, the select board, and individual members, people typically have a position to defend. Rarely, if ever, does a speaker say, there are reasons to vote for this article, but let me also note some reservations. That's what I'm going to attempt to do, based primarily on concerns that we have heard in earlier public reviews. Most legislative bodies, and town meeting is the town legislature, have multiple committees organized to vet proposed statutes, generally well before they come to the floor. Legislation can get changed for the better if the pros and cons are reviewed by a group representing the legislature. In our legislature, in which the members are volunteers with very limited time to do advanced research, this will provide information that could be quite helpful. Slam dunk, as they say. But aren't there ways in which this could go wrong? Well, despite the obligation to research and present both points of view, members could be biased and fail to meet these obligations. I would expect one person's bias would be offset by another's, and the end result is we would get a balanced analysis. While there is nothing in the proposed bylaw to guarantee this, I think it's worth the attempt to create a structure that makes it likely town meeting will hear both sides of the story before it proceeds. And how about expertise? Town meeting generally faces a very diverse set of articles. Will the committee have the necessary skills and experience or knowledge to do a good job? My expectation is that they would take advantage of the skills and experience of other Amherst citizens through relevant committees, interviews, holding their own public hearings, attending other relevant public meetings, and the like. That would make sense. We, the committee, has argued that there are a range of issues that ought to be considered by this committee. The following are examples of impacts that the committee report may address with respect to any particular warrant article as appropriate. And I put them up here. Benefits and impacts to specific neighborhoods. Benefits and impacts to particular economic groups of taxpayers. Benefits and impacts to special populations, children, families, elderly persons, the streetscape of the town, the town history and culture, public safety, economic vitality, and to the town's environment. Yeah, I guess I got it all there. Would the committee be a drain on the, even though every issue will not be relevant to every article, that's still a tall order. Will the committee have the motivation and energy to pursue these responsibilities? Will we get volunteers willing to sign on? We can only find out if we try. Would the committee be a drain on the time of town staff and others when committee members seek information to prepare their report? What will the true costs of the committee be? We could point to the Finance Committee, which has a similar but non-overlapping role to the proposed Town Meeting Advisory Committee. It seems to be able to keep within reasonable bounds. But am I certain that's a fair comparison? Will anyone read and value the committee report alongside the Finance Committee report when both arrive in the mail with the town meeting warrant? I personally would look forward to reading such a report and hearing what the committee has to say on the floor of town meeting. My guess is that there are others who would agree, or at least agree, that it is worthwhile to give the committee a shot. Brookline Town Meeting, which has a similar advisory committee, is reportedly able to move more quickly through its lengthy warrants than we are able to. I have recommended, with the blessing of the committee that I worked with, that we enact the bylaw and in 3 years' time ask for a revote. If this is a valuable idea, 3 years is long enough to prove itself. If it's not helpful, then we can remove the bylaw from the universe along with the committee, or tinker with the language if changes would fix what's wrong. This is an ambitious idea. It is intended to prove the quality of decision-making that we do in town meeting. Will it work as expected? I have attempted to review reasons why it would, as well as why it would not. Although there are likely more pros and cons to consider, I look forward to hearing the analysis offered by others. After all is said and done, each of us will weigh these and decide whether the potential benefits outweigh the risks of going forward. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Mic on. So, is my mic on? Is my mic on? Anybody? Yes, okay. So I have a little bit of a procedural dilemma here because it says in my script I'm supposed to call on Chris Riddell next to speak for the TMCC. Is that correct, or was Mr. Hornick's? Because really he spoke for the TMCC, so that's incorrect. Good. That solves my dilemma. I next call on Ms. Brewer for the Select Board.
Mr. Moderator, may I have 7 minutes with the intent of not using them up, but to give me the time?
So Ms. Brewer has requested an additional 4 minutes. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. No. You've got it. 7 minutes, hopefully less.
Thank you. Hopefully less. So, the Select Board voted on October 16th to not recommend this article to town meeting. Well, that was a unanimous vote on our part. I will point out to you immediately that we did not have the benefit of TMCC SPP's presentation to us because they got their dates mixed up and our schedule was full and we did not have time to ask them to come back on another date. They received the same outreach that every other committee had received. So it's a little confusing because a lot of what we based our discussion on was the fact that 2 of the 5 select board members had attended a specific September 13th meeting that TMCC SPP advertised to all of you as town meeting members and out into the community about this process. And in fact, the handout from that night is much the same as the handout you received in town meeting mailing number 1. So the select board certainly does try, with every kind of committee we have in town, to support what other committees are doing. Because we realize that as the select board, as the chief elected officials townwide, we are not experts in lots of areas. We like to think we know a lot of things, and we do know a lot of things because we work on things year-round that are a variety of issues. But we often look to expertise of other committees. We'll say, has Disability Advisory Access Committee looked at this? Has Conservation Commission looked at this? Et cetera. And so we certainly want to respect the apparent outreach that TMCC SPP has done with both the public and town meeting members to say, hey, this is what people want. So who are we to tell town meeting you don't actually want it? So in the spirit of the pros and cons, I tried to come up with a list. Of course, being me, the boxes got really, really long, and so I'm not going to put it up on the screen for you. But I'm going to try and touch on a few of them. So one thing this proposal does, in addition to all the things Mr. Hornick talked about, is you're going to probably get bored because this is process, but that's one of the things the select board's really devoted to. So what this does, what this proposal does, what this bylaw would do, is it would create a formalized town meeting discussion space that maybe would work all year round, unlike now where it tends to work just around the times of town meeting. But it would be subject to open meeting law with posted meetings and minutes, just like TMCC is now. Unfortunately, under our current contract with Amherst Media, those meetings wouldn't be taped or televised, but of course they'd still be public meetings, like lots of other meetings we have in town that aren't taped or televised. Unfortunately, though, the con would be that it creates an online deliberation that's likely going to violate open meeting law. So as soon as anybody on the TMCC, SAP, then the TMAC, then wants to talk to other town meeting members on the listserv, they're going to be considered communicating with a quorum. So the idea of the sort of free-for-all that the town meeting listserv is right now, that won't be possible to continue. That has not yet been discussed as being an issue. It may not be an issue for some of you, but it is something that we've been using for a while now in one format or another. Certainly, it sounds good to provide town meeting members another document to review in advance of town meeting sessions. You already get the warrant, the Finance Committee report, lots of other documents. And it says the report will be submitted to the town manager's office in a timely manner to allow mailing with the last distribution to town meeting members. So, as you know, at annual town meeting, we usually do two mailings, one for fall town meeting. But here's the thing. If you're talking about process and how this is practically going to work, in order to present all the pros and cons in advance of the town meeting sessions, this body is going to have, this new body, TMAC I'll call it, is going to have time to incorporate the recommendations of at least the Select Board and the Finance Committee deliberations in order to make their whole list of pros and cons. And so possibly Planning Board, other appointed committees, say it's a housing issue, they have to go to the trust, say it's a transportation issue, they have to go to Town Meeting Advisory Committee. It's Transportation Advisory Committee. So it's great that they want to go all those places. But the thing is, they often don't get their recommendations done at those bodies until a week or two before the actual first town meeting session. So the stuff's not going to be ready to mail in the second mailing. So it's a little unclear how having all this list is actually going to get to town meeting members ahead of time. It certainly would be nice to have another document to work from at warrant review and what we're now calling warrant discussions instead of precinct meetings. But again, we're not clear on how that timing is going to work, because if we're still making decisions at the Select Board on October 30th as to what the pros and cons of an article are, then TMAC isn't going to know what we said. And I'm going to go ahead and say, if TMAC doesn't know what the Select Board thinks when the Select Board works on this stuff all year round, then I'm not sure why they want to make a pro and con list that doesn't include some of the things that came up at Select Board, Finance Committee, Transportation Advisory, etc. It's stated on the handout that town meeting members don't always have time to delve into the details of articles. Well, we said at our meeting on the 16th, town meeting members are actually all year round town meeting members, so we're not sure why that's a problem. And we're not clear on why we need a separate body to do this. Right now, that town meeting discussion group's not subject to open meeting law. So the first duty of TMCC itself is to provide leadership, organization, education. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but TMCC could be doing all of these things now without having to elect a separate body. So it's not clear how that's going to work. And it talks about the fact that this would be helpful to people who are making petition articles, to give them friendly amendments that maybe would have support of the initiator, except those petitioners right now, they don't contact most of the bodies in town while they're writing their warrant articles. And in fact, TMCC SPP didn't talk to the Select Board about theirs as they were developing it. So we could have helped them with some of these concerns we had we talked about it ahead of time. So I have pages left of things I would tell you, but I won't bore you with it. What I will tell you is we are a little unclear in the staff resources. It does sound like it might not be a big investment, although it does seem like it puts the town manager in a bit of an awkward position because he's going to have to assign a staff member to do some portion of a job associated with this new body, like their staff associated with Finance Committee, and that means they're not going to be doing something else. And in terms of the sunset clause, there's nothing in the bylaw that says we're going to look at this again in 3 years. That's a theory. I will point out to you that the first time we talked about developing town meeting coordinating committee, we said the first time we passed it at town meeting that we would look at it every 5 years. We don't. So that's where we ended up. We do not recommend this article.
Ms. Tileman, I believe, for the Finance Committee, or Mr. Sharma for the Finance? Mr. Sharma for the Finance Committee.
The Finance Committee voted 4-2 with one member abstaining to make no recommendation on this article. As you well know, the Finance Committee evaluates articles that come before us by trying to answer a deceptively simple question. What are the financial implications for the town? I say deceptively simple because estimations of costs and benefits necessary for evaluating the financial implications are seldom straightforward. There is a great deal of judgment involved, and sometimes this seemingly simple question simply cannot be answered. So in discussing this article, the Finance Committee considered costs as those that may be associated with likely duplication of work that existing committees already do, public hearings, documentation and report writing, and staff time. It was not clear to us what those costs would actually add up to, only that they would be positive, directionally up. Furthermore, it was also understood that the proposed committee is not mandated by the statute, unlike committees such as the Finance Committee, which is required by charter. The real challenge for the Finance Committee was in trying to get a fix on the financial benefits that might outweigh the general sense of positive financial costs. It was the majority opinion that benefits could be from improved processes in the town meeting through alternate views, getting formal hearing, and therefore time savings during discussions of difficult articles. But we could not get a clear sense of what the financial benefits would add up to. This unknowability made the financial implications indeterminate. In fact, it appeared to the majority that the costs and benefits in this case are less financial and largely political. As such, especially given that the intent of this article is to educate the town meeting, it is our opinion that it is best to let the town meeting decide. Hence, the majority made no recommendation.
Thank you. This will require a majority vote for passage, and I now open it up to the floor for discussion. And right there, fifth row with the green card.
Michael Greenbaum, Precinct 6. Mr. Moderator, could we have back on the screen the list of benefits and impacts that Mr. Hornick referred to in his remarks? Thank you very much. Mr. Moderator, I'm a member of the committee that has crafted this motion, and I ask members to think back to Monday when we were all, boards, committees, and town meeting, sailing in uncharted waters with the legalization of marijuana usage. Monday is a particularly good example of why we need an advisory committee, because everybody was acting in an exemplary fashion, and yet something was missing. I call your attention to the screen to see what was missing. Let me mention just 3 of the issues that came up on Monday. The issue of marijuana retailers in mixed-use buildings, the impacts of such businesses on neighbors and neighborhoods, and possible use of regulation to discriminate against constitutionally protected activities. The Select Board, in proposing its regulatory stance, clearly indicated the pros and cons that it considered. The Planning Board report also mentioned mixed-use buildings and provided maps related to the location of such businesses and the implications for the zoning bylaw. The Finance Committee report raised, but could not answer, many concerns about impacts on taxation, particularly the sales tax. On the floor of town meeting, members asked questions, raised objections, and offered amendments and substitute motions, some of which passed and some of which didn't. As I say, this was all exemplary. And yet, as the clock neared and then passed 10 o'clock, it didn't feel exemplary. The mixed-use issue did not feel that it had been presented in the most useful way. The Select Board had to be pressed to acknowledge that 2 of its members had concerns about it. The Planning Board, which helpfully included pros and cons in its report, still failed to address the concerns that slowly began to emerge on the floor. And the issue of discrimination did not come up at all until it was addressed on the floor. An advisory committee charged with investigating benefits and impacts, such as those listed on the screen, would have provided us with a richer, fuller, and more timely way to consider how legalized marijuana might affect our town. If we had received the report in our mailing, rather than have these issues raised at 9:50 p.m., the debate on the floor might well have been shorter and better organized. TMAC is necessary not because anybody is doing anything wrong, but because doing everything right still is not giving us the best picture of the impacts of warrant articles on our town. I urge you to vote yes on Article 13.
Thank you. The white card right in the aisle there.
I'm Janet McGowan from Precinct 8. I'm from the SPP. And this is one of the first committees I've joined in town, and I got a packet about open meeting law from the town clerk. And so I was sitting in an orthopedist's office, which I often do with the various family members of mine who are injured. And I got to some page 12, and it said, town meeting is exempt from open meeting law. So and it explained why. I shut it, and then I emailed the town clerk, and I said, it looks like SPP is not subject to open meeting law because we're a body of town meeting. And TMCC isn't either. And we kind of went back and forth on it, and I'm kind of persistent, and it turns out she checked with the AG, and town meeting is not subject to open meeting law. That's why we can have an open listserv. TMCC doesn't have to post its meetings. It chooses to follow it. SPP, the Subcommittee on Policies and Procedures, we chose to follow it. TMAC will probably choose to follow it, but it's not subject to it. We don't have to, every time we send an email out to somebody or to the listserv, post that, or it's not deliberation. And so I just want to bring that out, and I think that's important to realize, is that there's a lot of reasons why town meeting is not subject to open meeting law, partly because we're constantly posting, because we're always talking about stuff. And so I just think that's a legal framework that's important to consider here, and just know. Thanks.
Thank you. And the town clerk just passed me a note confirming what the previous speaker said, that town meeting and subcommittees of town meeting are not subject to open meeting law. It may be a policy to comply, but it is not the law. Yeah, right there.
Amy Middleman, Precinct 5. Town meeting and the select board are co-equal parts of town government. Although I respect the select board's opinion, it is not really up to them to determine how town meeting governs itself. It is up to us, town meeting members, to decide if this new committee would be helpful. I believe it would be. It would help to inform our decisions on many issues and provide a diversity of opinion which is currently lacking. I urge we support this.
Way over in the left row, I see a red card there.
Kathryn, Oppy, Precinct 9. I'm going to vote against this article, in large part because I see every member in this room as an elected official responsible to their constituents. And in that, I understand that it's my responsibility to do my homework, to understand the articles, to read the reports that are coming from the committees, but also to be in touch with my constituents. So I do appreciate the new email process where constituents can email their town meeting representatives in a much easier way than in the past. But I see this as another layer of committee that could potentially have the rest of town meeting feeling like, well, I can just show up at town meeting and I'm going to get the report from this new subcommittee, and so I'll learn about it there. I would much rather have members feel compelled to do their own homework, speak to their own constituents, and make their own decisions. Thank you.
In the back, also holding a red card.
Hank Vandenberg, Precinct 4. First of all, I would like to just suggest that we not focus on efficiency. Democracy is not efficient in the sense that we have to get things done fast, and faster is somehow better. Again, that was sort of implied by the speaker who introduced the motion. Secondly, we are a body of 240 people. That's an incredible amount of knowledge. Replacing that by a committee, every committee or every group eventually gets a life of its own and will take precedence over what 240 people are supposed to decide. I hope it isn't number 13 people for that committee, because that's what we're fighting as it is in town meeting. Stick with the 240 and let the opinions flow on the floor, and let the spontaneity be there, and let the various interests present themselves and contribute to the debate, and don't replace it by yet another committee, another group, again, that's going to get a life of its own and form its own, discussions among themselves, and probably not present all of the viewpoints. Thank you.
Yes, green card on the aisle right there, yes.
Thank you. Don't need that. Hello, I'm Meg Gage, Precinct 1, and I encourage you to join me in supporting Article 13. I applaud the Town Meeting Coordinating Committee, and particularly the Subcommittee on Policies and Procedures, for taking the initiative to propose ways we might better operate to make the best possible decisions for our town. This proposal is consistent with other recent reforms, including the colored cards that help the moderator manage discussion, making our email addresses available to the public, the proactive warrant review sessions, and the wonderful electronic voting. I'm a longtime supporter and member of town meeting. As a member of the Charter Commission, I came to see ways town meeting could work better in terms of clearer representation, improved scheduling in relation to when state budget information is available, and helping members have the information they need to make the best decisions. One of my deep disappointments of my participation in the Charter Commission was the refusal of the 5-person majority to undertake a rigorous discussion of how town meeting might work better, possibly creating a proposal that, while it would have made people at both ends of the spectrum very unhappy, might have been a middle way and a step toward less polarization and rancor. But that discussion did not happen, and Amherst is now headed for a decision which will have big-time winners and losers. But back to Article 13. It's a part, in response to the comment over there, of any healthy, functioning, strong legislative branch that appointed committees look more deeply into proposals, research that everyone in the legislative body could not undertake. While town meeting usually approves proposals brought by town staff and town committees, sometimes those proposals have not been adequately thought through from all the points of view of people affected. In the spring, a couple of zoning proposals came to town meeting with no recommendation, and the lacking context in a recommendation, and the lack of a recommendation, town meeting defeated them. A couple of years ago, town meeting might have made a different decision about the zoning changes to allow the 5th floor on Kendrick Place if we had received information about the impact that 5th floor on the skyline and appearance to the building would have. I have some additional, probably controversial ideas about how town meeting could be improved, and I hope we have the chance in the future to discuss those changes. But that's not what we're here to discuss tonight, which is Article 13. I strongly encourage you to vote yes. This is what democracy looks like.
Thank you. Second row right there with the green card.
Hi, John Druso, Precinct 3. I just want to voice my support for this on two grounds. The first is that I am a very young town meeting member, and a lot of you guys have been here for many years, and there's a lot of history behind a lot of bills that come up. And to get more input on those bills and the history behind them and the impacts that they have, especially for someone who is new to town meeting and new to a legislative body, that has a huge impact, not only on how someone votes, but also on how they come to their vote and the process that they use to look at information when they decide how they're going to vote. The other is that I think we are an elected body, and that means that to a degree we have a responsibility that when we see 3 or 4 reports in front of us or 3 or 4 opinions in front of us, we have to decide what that looks like with our own constituents and whether or not we agree with that. I think we're really in an age right now where the ability to look at what we see in front of us and decide, do I believe this, do I not, do I agree with this, do I not, is important. And I would like to believe that everyone in this room has that. And so I think the assumption that people would just look at a piece of paper and say, oh, it says not agree on this, so I'm going to vote against it. I don't think that's accurate. I don't think that's what anyone in this room is doing. All the time I've been here, there are very deep, meaningful discussions and really interesting questions brought up on the floor. And I don't think a simple report is going to change that. And so I would just urge you guys, in the interest of democracy and in the interest of the most information possibly available to every member here, to vote yes.
Thank you. Yes, front row there with the white card.
Aaron Hayden, Precinct 8. I have a question for the petitioners. This year, in the course of last year, we dipped below 48 committees, most of which have been appointed by town meeting. Those committees deal all year long with various subjects like disabilities access, planning, zoning, design reviews, transportation, housing, historical districts, a whole range of issues that town meeting has felt was important, that a body of folks who in the open meeting law process announce their meetings, announce the subjects that they're dealing with at that point, and ultimately some of them come forward to town meeting as a report. My question is, you mentioned briefly that you would interface with these. I'm wondering what the interface would be, and I'm wondering if the principal difference between the TMAC and those committees is that the committees are not required and often not asked to present a written report to town meeting on subjects that we're dealing with at that time. Maybe that's a simpler change, but I'm just wondering what the relationship might be with those committees whose members are committed to 2 things. 1, figuring out the issue, and 2nd, the best way to apply what they've learned to the town, to the constituencies that they all represent in one way or another.
Mr. Hornick?
First, I think the last speaker may have misspoke. None of the other town committees are appointed or elected by town meeting. They are all appointed by either the select board or the town manager or the 2 working together. So this would be a relatively unique committee. The second question is, how would it work with other town boards and committees? And I can speculate about that, and I will for a minute. I am, for example, the chairman of the Amherst Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. We meet once a month, and if we're going to have something to bring to town meeting, which we will from time to time, I would hope that the TMAC would send 1 or 2 members to find out what we're doing and to listen to our discussion so they could learn from it. If I present something as the chair of the trust, I am going to tell you why I think you should pass it. Unlike today, I'm not going to tell you why I think you shouldn't pass it or what the downside is. And I think that's fairly common when town committees, when town committees bring something before us. So somebody else needs to take the responsibility for looking at both sides of the story. Now, as people have pointed out, that's everybody's responsibility. But I was trained as a social psychologist, and one of the things I learned is that when it's everybody's responsibility, sometimes it's nobody's responsibility. So to have a group that takes this as their charge, I think will help us. I don't think it will undermine what occurs on the floor of town meeting, but I do think it will be helpful in terms of adding information that people might not be easily able to ferret out for themselves. So that's why kind of I'm here presenting it. I don't know if it will work out perfectly. I think I was clear about that. But I do think it's an important idea. It's worth giving it a shot. If it doesn't work out, then we can get rid of it. And that would be the right thing to do. But at this point in time, I can't promise you that the risks that I mentioned or the risks that other people mentioned will all go away. Thank you.
Right in the aisle here.
Kay Moran, Precinct 4. I'm opposed to this for two reasons. First of all, I think these people will have a bigger job than they can actually do. You talked about the Affordable Housing Trust, and when we created that, it was a very technical thing to create. And your committee had the expertise to come up with the best one. I don't know if somebody coming in from outside would be able to look at all the impacts, pro and con, that your committee didn't discuss. Where would they go? Would they talk to some housing expert outside? It's a big commitment for each of these articles sometimes to learn more than the committee who's devised it, to learn more and to present both sides if there are two sides. So I think it's an awfully big job. And my other concern about it is that it's going to turn into an advocacy committee. When you have people analyzing pros and cons, they're going to inevitably, it's human nature, come out on one side or the other. You have not said in your materials at all that you would be making recommendations on town meeting articles, but I find it hard to believe that you won't inevitably be doing that. And maybe that's what we want a committee for, but I think that it's not what I want a committee for, another committee.
Yeah, right, second in from the aisle with the red card there.
John Cool, Precinct 2. We have 240 members, every one of whom is free to go to the meetings of any of the town committees that are proposing any legislation to town meeting. And I think they're perfectly able to do that. And I think that leaving it alone without an interface, an appointed body of our representatives of the representative town meeting is totally unnecessary, and I urge you to vote this down.
Yes, second row right there.
Chris Riddell, Precinct 2, and co-chair of the Subcommittee on Policy and Procedures, and a member of the TMCC. I would like to explore the notion that this is something we don't need, that all of us can go out and do our research and get to the bottom of all of these myriad articles, such as, for instance, as Mr. Greenebaum pointed out, the the marijuana article that we considered, which I found astoundingly complex and hard to process. The logic that says that we all should do our own homework and get totally up to speed on complex and intricate articles would apply also to the Finance Committee. Why do we ask the Finance Committee to give us advice on the financial impacts of all of these articles, for which I am extremely grateful and I'm extremely happy that I don't have to attend all of the financing budgetary meetings of the town. I think the Finance Committee provides an extremely valid and useful function, and I think this committee is a parallel concept that would provide the same array of services for an array of for several other impacts. So I strongly hope you will support this article.
Thank you. All the way in the back with the green card.
Hello, Helen Berg, Precinct 1. I think that this should be supported because we are facing an unprecedented challenge in this town to turn it into a city council, and to raise the level of the downtown core to 4 or 5 stories high. Not to mention that the university seems to be subsuming the town. I think that every day I talk to people that want to know how to get an article on the warrant. It's not clear to a lot of people. I'm kind of appalled that this body lacks a transportation for people to come here and actually witness town government at work. So I very, very strongly urge that this passes. Maybe we can get a shuttle bus to come out here so that people can see how town meeting works, can get articles on the warrant. Some people bemoan some of the things we've passed, like the plastic bag bill. But they, the Emwood would like to see it reversed. But it's not clear at all to them how to get an article on the warrant. Thank you.
Yes, right in the center of the back there. But yet another reminder, if you hold your card like this, I can't see what color it is.
Mary Streeter, Precinct 8. I rise in support of this article. I think it will lead to greater knowledge from all of us. We do have to be realistic. We all don't have time to attend all the different meetings that are of great importance, and often don't even have time to watch it on TV. This is a committee that would probably, as I speculate along with John, that maybe there would be someone who goes to the zoning subcommittee. That's no longer televised, so that would be an important kind of information to have. I did want to mention a couple of other things, that there are only 2 committees of town meeting, the Finance Committee mandated by law, and the TMCC, Town Meeting Coordinating Committee, which was written into our bylaws. We also in the bylaws, we have the right to create subcommittees from time to time. And so we did that because I heard a previous speaker say that, well, maybe TMCC can do something. TMCC is loaded to the max. I'll tell you that. There's no more time for us to do additional things, and that's why I greatly appreciate the work of the Subcommittee on Policies and Procedures. I think the TMAC, Town Meeting Advisory Committee, will give us greater insight, and we also have the option of, if we don't like it, we can dissolve it again. And the thing I wanted to stress too is that this is an elected body of town meeting. That's something that TMCC has now, and town meeting has the right and privilege to elect whoever they want to be on a committee. So I urge you all to vote in favor of this article.
Yeah, the white card right there. Yes, yellow sweater, whatever.
Precinct 5. I call the question.
Can I have my mic on, please? Thanks. Motion for the previous question has been made and seconded. We will now come to immediate vote. If 2/3 of you vote yes, we will then come to a vote on Article 13. All those in favor of the motion for the previous question, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. No. Moderator, here's 2/3. We're going to have an electronic vote on the motion for the previous question. Your device is ready. And the voting window is open. And let's display the results, then we'll have a point of order. Do you have a device that's not working? Yeah. It's 2/3. Did it display something other than 2/3? No, it's 2/3. And it passes with 2/3, 123 to 25. Let me just write that down. And now we will come to vote on the motion before us, which is Article 13, which in itself requires a majority vote. All those in favor for the motion under Article 13, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. No. Let's have an electronic vote. And you may display the results. Yes, 99, no, 81. So Article 13 has passed. 99, 81.